This is executive recruiter Jeff Hyman. I'm here to talk about finding the talent to ignite your business next on the RecTech podcast.
Welcome to RecTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
Yes, indeed. It's time once again for RecTech, the only podcast that helps employers and recruiters connect with more candidates through technology-inspired conversations. Today's show is a recruiter edition. First, let me give a shout out to our sponsor. This episode of RecTech is sponsored by the team at Lever, providing a modern take on the applicant tracking system. Lever combines ATS and CRM functionality in a single powerful platform to help you source, nurture, and manage your candidates all in one place. They offer a branded job site, custom sourcing tools, great metrics, email and calendar integration, along with a host of other benefits that your recruiting team will love to use. Best of all, Lever's simple interface means that hiring managers and applicants will also love it. To find out how Lever can help you both accelerate and humanize your hiring, visit lever.co/RecTech. That's lever.co/RecTech. Lever is where ATS meets CRM. Okay, my guest today says, quote, 90% of business problems are actually recruiting problems in disguise. If you're filling your company's vacant positions with B players, you're playing with fire. Instead, hire Rockstars, the top 5% of candidates who have the desired competencies and DNA at the budgeted compensation level to build an organization with limitless potential. Jeff Hyman is the Chief Talent Officer for StrongSuit and author of a new book, Recruit Rockstars, the 10-Step Playbook to find the winners and ignite your business. Hey, Jeff, welcome to RecTech.
Hey, Chris. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, my friend. You're calling us from Chicago, the Windy City, where the frozen tundra is well underway. Hope you're staying warm.
Unfortunately, this is the other 6 months of the year.
Yeah, right? Well, it's a few more months to spring, so hang in there. So thanks for coming on the show. I've been reviewing the book before the call here, so we'll get into that. I'm curious first, Jeff, the show is kind of about recruiting technology. I'm curious how you view that today as part of the recruiting process. And I'm curious what kind of tools you use today to recruit. So talk about that if you would, start out.
Yeah. So how I view it is that it is, if anything, it's become a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
A guy like you is totally necessary to kind of sift through because there's a lot of point solutions that are pretty one-off and frankly just not worth the time, the investment, even just the learning curve. But when you compare to, earlier in my career, 20, 25 years ago, for those that might be younger listeners, it's night and day in terms of tools that make you more faster, able to target candidates and reach them in ways that back then we were, using the phone book and a telephone. So it's come a long way.
Tell me more about some of the people you place today and kind of, what tools you use to find them.
Yeah, so we focus on VP and above level executives nationally, for the most part at venture capital and private equity funded companies. So, VP marketing, VP of sales, VP of finance, et cetera. Our go-to tool is, of course, LinkedIn, because I would say 95+% of our target candidates are on LinkedIn. A little different than software developers and some other categories that we don't focus on, where you might have a little bit less success there. Yeah. I've been told even as recently as yesterday that developers are starting to pull off of LinkedIn just because they're so tired of being besieged by recruiters. But for us, VP roles, business roles, just LinkedIn is the place. We use CAT as our applicant tracking system. It's nice, it's simple, it's easy, great user interface, and that's kind of what we, as a small firm, focus on. We looked at a number of them, and there's a lot of really good ones, but some of them are just make much more sense for a larger firm, which we didn't need being a boutique executive search firm.
CATS is free, isn't it?
They have a free version, but we're on a paid version. Okay. So as soon as you upgrade based on features, it's...
Gotcha. Okay. Any sort of other sourcing tools or onboarding tools you use?
we're always experimenting with one category, which are these new predictive engines that can try to identify candidates who might be beginning to look because they've updated their LinkedIn profile within a certain number of days. Mm-hmm. They've updated their resume. They've been at a company for more than 2 years, which in our case is the statistical mean. So there's a number of these tools, right? I've seen, 5 or 6 of them. None have blown me away, but I certainly see where they could be a useful tool, because we're always especially interested in candidates who are currently working but may starting to become a little disenfranchised, or disengaged. And so that category of tools, I think, holds great promise.
Yeah, I think there's a couple
for the industry.
There's a couple I know. I think Intello has coming out with a product like that.
Yeah.
And I think HireTool has something like that built into it as well.
That's right. So. Again, easier said than done. They're not going to be perfect, but as a way of prioritizing one's time and focusing on candidates who have been at a company for 3 years versus just got there, it might be a useful tool.
Yeah, there's definitely some signals there they can pick up on. Getting back to LinkedIn for a second, Jeff. So I imagine your LinkedIn emails are a pretty big of use. Do you, first of all, what version of LinkedIn do you have, and then what's your open rate like?
Yeah, we're on the highest tier of LinkedIn, so it's a pretty sizable investment. And I'm maybe spoiled or maybe lucky, but our open rate is exceptionally high. I think that's because I've learned to keep those notes incredibly short. I've actually tracked it and found the shorter the better.
Yep.
The subject line is just one word, which I'm happy to share is confidential. For whatever reason, it seems to get noticed, and literally the note is like 3 sentences, just enough to arouse their curiosity. The mistake I see a lot of recruiters make is they send a whole job listing or a whole job description. That's like saying, "Hey, let's get married before we kiss," and it doesn't make sense. And I'm also, spoiled because I've got a little bit of credibility as an author on the topic and a professor at Kellogg Business School on the topic. And so if a candidate looks at my profile, they might assume that, I might be worth having a short conversation with.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. It's an interesting take on how you, use LinkedIn to make it effective for you. So I appreciate that. All right, let's talk about the book a bit. It's called Recruit Rockstars, 10-Step Playbook to Find the Winners and Ignite Your Business. In the book, you talk a lot about using sales and marketing techniques to recruit, especially around the job description. And you say replace it with a job invitation, which I think is a great way to look at this. I always said, job ads, not job description. So explain what a job invitation is and kind of take us through that.
So it's a subtle distinction, but a big one, and big enough that I wanted to come up with a term that kind of encapsulated the essence behind it. Job descriptions, as you and I have spoken before, Chris, are notoriously just horrific, right?
Yes,
I think 99% of them are terrible.
Yep.
No offense to anybody, but they're written by some HR person or some recruiter, some legal person, whatever. And in addition to be dreadfully boring when they should be enticing, more importantly, they're written from the company perspective. So someone, to save some time, basically copied and pasted the scorecard and said, here's the 18 bullet points of requirements, and cut and pasted them right into a job description. And nothing could be further from effective than that, primarily because in addition to being boring and not enticing, they're not written from the candidate's point of view. Again, with 4% unemployment, everyone's working, and so you're at full employment, which means you're trying to entice passive job seekers. At least that's what we're paid to do. That's what my clients expect me to do.
Yep.
And a poorly written job description that's written from my perspective doesn't tell them what's in it for them. Not just the job, but the company, the sector, the industry, the investors behind it, et cetera. That's what it takes to get candidates interested. And so the word invitation is used by design, which is just the concept that we are inviting you to just have an exploratory discussion with us. There's no obligation. There's no guilt involved. Certainly, we're going to be confidential and discreet. And that's a very different mindset than apply here or attach your resume, right? I find that heavy approach just doesn't work with candidates.
So what are the elements of a good job invitation?
Well, obviously the title is important, right? The job title. And so there's mixed opinions on that. Do you go traditional, financial analyst, or do you go with something a bit, a bit esoteric or a bit eyebrow raising? I've tried to use a combination. I find that works really well. So we might use something like, master of the numbers and then parentheses financial analyst. So we get them to understand that this is a bit different. There's something noteworthy here, but I clearly understand what the role is just, in 1 second. So we use a hybrid approach, and that works really well. In terms of the other components, it's not about length. If it takes you more than a page or two, you're rambling too long. Certainly more of it is about the company and the industry and what it's like to work there. That is what people want to know about, even before they know about the specifics of the job. So if I had to come up with a ratio, it's like 80-20, right, or 75-25. We don't just start with, here's the job. Here's the company. Here's how we're changing the world. Here's our world-class investors. Our CEO is known for this. Here's what it's like to work here. And, by the way, here's kind of what we're looking for in a financial analyst. But it is not a laundry list of must-haves. And the reason for that is studies have shown, as recently as a Harvard Business Review a couple of years ago, that people take those bullet points very literally. And so if I don't think I meet those, I am not going to throw my hat in the ring. I would guess just people don't want to be rejected, right? Fear of rejection. In fact, 100% almost of women will not pursue a role unless they feel they meet those requirements. So you've got to be very sparse and very realistic about that list of must-have requirements.
Yeah, it's important to if you are concerned about diversity and making that job sound appeal to everyone, not just a certain segment. So I guess the job value proposition, which you talk about in the book, that's really where the company culture meets the kind of the mission of the job, right?
Absolutely, it's hugely important. Studies of candidates say that's what they want to know about, is what is it like to work here? Tell me about the culture. Tell me about the kind of people that do their best work here. I actually think it's very hard to do in words, in prose. And so when it comes to a search with my clients, we always include a link to a video. And I don't care if that video is done on an iPhone 8, right? It does not need to be high production value, doesn't need to be amazing graphics or expensive, but it just brings the story to life in a way that words can't.
Yeah, I go a step further, embed it into the job description. There should be a visual on every job description out there today, whether it's just something just to get to pique the interest of the candidate. I mean, it's a visual world, and job descriptions are not visual today. So, all right,
totally agree.
Yep. You talk about test driving candidates as part of the approach to recruiting. So just expand on that, if you would. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, sure. So where most people stop, of course, is after the interviews, right? We've all had that day where we interview the candidate, and she's amazing, and call off the search. I found the director of marketing, and that's good, but unfortunately, interviews are notoriously unpredictable, and this is where there's a bit of a disconnect between an outside recruiter, such as myself, and a company, a client, the employer, in that the outside recruiter wants to get the search completed and move on. My model is a little different. I have a 12-month guarantee, which means I'm putting my name on this person. I need to be sure they're going to do well, or I have to repeat the search, which I don't like doing. So the data shows that 91% of companies skip the single most predictive part, or most predictive thing you can do in a recruiting process, and that is what I call the test drive. You can call it a tryout or a job audition or a dry run, whatever you want to call it. But essentially, it's anywhere from an hour to a day to a week, perhaps. But it's a short exercise that is a real-world exercise, a simulation that closely approximates the work that is to be done. Now, big companies are doing this now, finally, for software developers, right? There's some code, or take this test online. That's a good start, but you should be doing this for every role, every level, without exception, because it is far more predictive than an interview. And what you'll find, as I have found, Chris, is you'll interview, the person's amazing, out of central casting, great potential sales rep, etc. You conduct that test drive, and they bomb. right? They are not either the interview was full of it, or they're not able to make decisions. They're not able to ask the right questions or take new input and data. And so the interview has been a false negative or false positive, sorry. And that test drive can help you avoid a huge hiring mistake.
Nice. Okay. You had some interesting stats around sourcing in the book. You say 150 resumes, LinkedIn profiles, or referrals will yield approximately 20 candidates worth talking to. That first number isn't arrived at arbitrarily. It has proven time and time again to be the optimally sized pool to produce successful results.
Yeah. So it's experiential. It's been very consistent for me over the years that if I only start with 10, I've got a problem. If I start with 1,000, then I'm wasting a lot of time. And so there is a point of diminishing returns. And I've validated this with a lot of recruiters that I know. Now, just to be very clear, and this is an important point of the funnel, 150 potential candidates would be folks that we don't know. We have no relationship. They have not been referred by someone that we trust, right? There are 150 people, quote unquote, raw candidates, off the street. That's obviously not my preferred method. My preferred method is through referrals and networking to get to a shorter list of viable candidates. In other words, people that someone I trust has said, this is your guy or this is your gal. And that is what I mean in the book by 20 viable candidates. So it's always my preference to start at that stage of 20. If I can start with 20 folks, a sizable pool, but not an overwhelming pool, who have been referred to me either by my employees, if I'm an employer, or by other clients or my investors, whoever, 20 can usually get the job done. But barring that, I have to go up in the funnel, if you will, and talk to roughly 150 just to get to that 20 who are both, interested in having a discussion. The timing is right, and I can afford, and at least initial discussion that they're worth having a discussion with. And then you're off to the races down to, 5 kind of semi-finalists, which lead to 2 finalists. I always shoot for having 2 finalists, not 1, because, you don't always get the yes on your first choice candidate these days.
Yeah, sure. You're also a fan of boomerangs, Jeff, going back and looking for employees that used to work for you. Talk about that a bit. I thought that was interesting because I think something that I don't hear a lot of recruiters today talk about, but I think it's a viable pool of candidates out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a great source of candidates. Now, there is a bit of a philosophy or religion question around this because some companies say absolutely no returns. It's a one-way door, and if you choose to leave, you ain't coming back. And I think they do that out of emotion. I think they do that because they're hurt that the candidate has betrayed them, so to speak, and left and gone to another company. Now, if they go to a direct competitor or something, or do something, litigious, I understand. But in many cases, I just don't see the need to have that hostility, that emotion. Other companies, such as the ones I've led, I've started 4 companies, we welcome boomerangs back. Now, that doesn't mean we guarantee you're coming back. So if you leave and we find someone that's a higher performer, or we, the business changes, doesn't mean it's a two-way ticket. But why wouldn't you look at a boomerang, someone who left your company, knows your company, knows your business inside and out, has gone to the other side and found the grass is not greener. Now they want to come back. That, to me, is an amazing opportunity to rehire a top performer. Otherwise, you're not going to rehire them. To instill to the rest of the organization that the grass is not always greener. Here comes a rock star running back because the other job didn't pan out the way they hoped. Their ramp-up time is going to be hours or days, not weeks or months or quarters. So to me, it is a win-win. I just don't understand people that are averse to it. And I think the challenge, maybe for some of your listeners, is as an outside recruiter, I think that there is an expectation amongst our clients that we're going to find someone off the radar, someone that they had never known about, right? A new person, fresh meat, whatever you want to call it. And I get that. I totally get that. My clients expect the same, but my clients are also business people and smart. And if I can bring back someone that worked at their company and left a year ago, turns out they're miserable, and they hesitated on coming back for whatever reason, and I can facilitate that discussion and get them to the table, I found clients are open to it. It doesn't happen that often, but to me it is a great source, certainly a great source of referrals and networking, because again, they know the culture, they know the inside scoop, they know people that would fit in that culture, even if they didn't.
Yep, corporate alumni. So, Jeff.
Corporate alumni.
Yeah. I know a lot of experienced recruiters out there. One of the sentiments that they always lament about is the lack of good recruiters. So how do you spot a great recruiter? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so just so I'm clear, you're talking inside, outside, or either?
Either, yeah.
Well, I would sadly agree that we've got an industry, a recruiting industry that has a wide array of quality.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. It is a apprenticeship business. It is not a certification or education-driven business. This is a hard knock kind of industry that you learn over time. So you actually can have an advantage having a few years under your belt and just seen more searches, seen more candidates, more interviews, etc. That doesn't mean older is better. It just means that it does help because it is, to some extent, pattern recognition, right? So it's harder for people starting out in the business, and so I always advise them to kind of, seek out a mentor or advisor. But, some of the questions that I hope a employer would ask, and I've asked, recruiters as I've hired them internally or externally, are about their process, about their methodology, about their discipline, and about their their philosophy on recruiting. And I know that sounds soft and fuzzy, but as an example, I feel strongly, as I lay out in the book, that DNA, which is hardwired before age 10, is pretty predictive of how that person is going to perform and behave on the job. Whereas the school they went to, their GPA, how they dress, all these other arcane factors are not that predictive. And so I view a recruiter as the most important hire I'll ever make, because they're now going out into the world to find the rest of my hires, the rest of my organization that I'm building my company upon. And if we're not in sync on what it is we're looking for, on our philosophy about what is predictive, what's not predictive, then I have to move on to another recruiter because, A, I don't have the time to teach them, but B, we just have a different philosophy. Yeah. Now, that's not right or wrong, but I'm a very data-driven person. I think 30 years ago when we didn't know what was predictive, we thought schools were, even Google thought GPA was, they've stopped all that nonsense. They've stopped asking brain teaser questions and things that just, if you think about it just for a minute, are not predictive of anything. And this is all about predicting the person will succeed. If a recruiter is going to be a good recruiter, they should be willing to put their name on the candidate, which means I know this person's going to do well. And by the way, they should have a longer guarantee than many people have, because you might as well, if you're going through all that work and predicting the success, you might as well have a longer guarantee, not a month or 3 months. So those are some of the things that I look for.
Nice. Okay. Along the same lines, the interview process, what are some of your favorite questions to ask your candidates as you're going about your sourcing activities and talking to them?
This is where I probably surprise and disappoint a lot of people, because I don't have any trick questions. I've tried every trick question, every sexy question, every 1001 question in those books. And again, I'm kind of obsessive, a little bit OCD about asking things that are predictive. And what I need to get at is the person's DNA. Do they stick with things when the going gets tough? Are they open to input? Can they ask the right questions and make the right decisions that tie to that role at that particular company at that point in time? And I just don't find that trick questions do it. So I ask the same questions over and over again. I ask them for every position. It's a bit mundane. It's not about entertaining me. It's about getting the data. And then what I do is I try to understand, is this person's career trending up? Has it flattened? Is it trending down? And if I'm asking the same questions over and over for each role, it gives me the benefit of being able to do that. I can now accurately assess how are things trending. How do they make their decisions about what companies they join? What are their references going to say when I speak with them? Why did they choose to leave? Did they leave any dead bodies in their wake? Those kinds of things. And if you're asking different questions to entertain yourself, to keep it interesting, you're not going to be able to get that. You're also not going to be able to compare across candidates, which is the whole point of recruiting, right? And so again, I'm very obsessive about asking the same questions. I'll even tell the candidate the questions in advance. I'm not looking to make them nervous. Oh, yeah? I want the relaxed, authentic candidate, the person. I don't want their game face. That doesn't help me at all.
That's interesting that you share them with beforehand. I haven't heard too many recruiters do that.
Yep. I'm not looking to trick them, to make them nervous. I'm looking for the inverse. I actually have, over the past few years, started the interview giving the candidate the opportunity to ask some questions. Now, I'm very mindful about the time, right? I don't let too much time get away. Mm-hmm. But what I find is, I can tell a ton about an individual by the questions they ask. Not only just have they done their research, but how insightful are they? How intelligent are they? Do they focus on, the big things or minutia? But also, I find it relaxes them. It makes them feel like they're in control of the meeting. Their senses are lowered, not heightened. They're not sweating. They're not nervous anymore. Gives them a chance to breathe so that when I begin my questions, I just get a much more authentic individual.
Jeff, let's a couple more questions for you here. Certainly appreciate the time and the information. It's been great so far. Tell me one of your most creative recruiting stories from your past, someone that was really challenging to find in place. I'm curious what comes to mind.
Well, I don't know that this would qualify as especially exciting, but I will say that about a year ago, just under a year ago, I was looking for someone for my company. So this is a personal experience. We were recruiting for a position internally, and had looked high and low. Right, there were no shortage of candidates, no shortage of discussions, and still hadn't found the person. And I'm known for keeping positions open for 6 to 12 months versus settling for a B player. Mm-hmm. So it had been open for a while. The pain was pretty significant, and maybe I'm my own worst client. But we are. This was a kind of a project manager / office manager kind of role, and I'm at dinner with a few friends at a high-end restaurant in Chicago, and meet one of those servers that you've had in your lifetime who just blow you away, right? They from the minute they meet you at the table to the minute you leave the tip, which is, of course, a much better tip than otherwise, you're blown away by this person. They're proactive. They're preemptive. They can almost read your mind. Their, of course, attention to detail and follow-up is the presence, how they carry themselves, their confidence, their humor, everything. Met this gal. She's incredible. Midway through the discussion, kind of brought up this concept of, what I do, and she seemed just the least bit intrigued, not a lifetime waiter or waitress. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the discussion, she got my business card. I had her email address. I was convinced that she could do the job in her sleep based on some previous work that she had mentioned to me. Now, I didn't hire her for some other reasons, but got her to the table, went through the whole process, gave her the offer. She wound up moving away from Chicago, which is why she didn't take the job.
Okay.
She got engaged. But it was a very close call. And I think what it shows you is how fortuitous recruiting can be, that you always need to be recruiting. You never know where you're going to find it. You can't judge a lid by its cover. Many people are just downright rude to waiters and waitresses. Mm-hmm. I treat them, and all people, as well as they can, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because you just never know. You never know.
Definitely.
And so that's a recent example that just kind of comes to mind.
Nice. Jeff, I have a T-shirt that says "Always Be Recruiting."
So I'd love to get one.
Nice.
I'd love to get one. That's great.
All right. Last question for you, Jeff. What advice do you have for those recruiters who are just starting out in the business? Any words of wisdom?
Yeah, I'd have a couple things. The first, like I said earlier, get a mentor. Get a guide. If it's not your boss, that person just doesn't have the time for you, or or they're not a great manager, the onus is on you to find one. That's whether you're an internal recruiter or outside. This is an apprenticeship business. I was very fortunate to have a couple of great mentors early in my career, the CEO of Hydrick and Struggles, where I worked as an example. And it is one of those kinds of businesses, not so much for Rolodex or leveraging their network, but just really for some of the subtle points of recruiting. And then the second would be find your own voice. Find your process, your methodology. What I lay out in the book isn't the end-all, be-all. It is not the only process. It is not the only system, but it's a system. It's what's worked for me over 25 years of doing this, which is why I wanted to share it. But I don't care if that's what you use, but most recruiters don't have a methodology, a process, a discipline. And you do find that you become better with every search, with every interview that you do, with every candidate, if you have a process. And that process, so much of it is guided by two questions. One is, what is truly predictive? And stop paying attention to the noise that is not predictive. And don't let your clients do it either. And then second, how do I master what I would call the touch points? Every search, every candidate has these very important touch points. The first email to the candidate, the first 10 seconds of the first phone conversation, when I meet them at the client office, whatever it may be, the thank you note, the follow-up, presenting the offer. You mess up any one of those touch points with a candidate and you will lose them. And in a day of this kind of low unemployment, you can't afford to lose a candidate, right? You have invested all that time with. So master those touch points as early as you can.
All right. Well, Jeff Hyman, the book is called Recruit Rockstars. Thanks for joining me today. Tell people where to connect with you and where to get the book.
So it was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me. So the probably the easiest way is recruitrockstars.com, which is the website, recruitrockstars.com. You can learn all about the book and the table of contents and what other people have said. And you can email me, jeff@recruitrockstars.com.
Awesome. And we'll link to that in the show notes. That will do it for this edition of the RecTech Podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor. Remember to check out lever.co/RecTech for your ATS needs. Great people there. You can subscribe to the show via iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and now Stitcher Radio. Hey, if you like the show, please leave a review on your channel of choice. I'd love to see your feedback or mention us on the social media with hashtag RecTech. If you want to suggest a guest, just email me, chris@rectechmedia.com. And follow me on Twitter @ChrisRussell or visit rectechmedia.com where you can find the audio links and other information for this show on our blog. Just a reminder, I'm a consultant, helps both HR tech firms and employers to get more clients or candidates. Thanks for listening, everyone.